as the shadows crawl. Curtains rise, a ghostly sprawl. The frames are whispers, the stories call. Projectors hum in a hollow tune. Moonlight cuts through velvet gloom. Is it a dream or a real too soon? Step into the screen where the dark turns keen. Join me with the Cinephile, unseen, unseen. The tales twist and turn as the silent light burns. A world unknown where the shadows yearn.
Hello and welcome, listeners, to Journey with a Cinephile, a horror movie podcast, where we take a deep dive into the world of horror cinema, from the eerie classics to the latest spine-chilling releases. Join me as I explore the history, themes, and artistry of horror one film at a time. Whether you're a seasoned horror fan or just stepping into the shadows, this journey is for you. So dim the lights, embrace the fear, and let's talk horror. And let's do that here on episode 302. I am your tour guide of David Garrett Jr., recording out of Columbus, Ohio. So for this episode here is going to be my Voyage to the Fives number 17. My two featured reviews, I wasn't necessarily sure if I was going to be able to get to see it or not, but it's going to be Weapons, and this one I got to go see at the Gateway Film Center, and I'm be pairing up with The Demon of the Himalayas. Doesn't make for the greatest double feature, but we are dealing with maybe some slight supernatural undertones of things that are happening on events that we cannot necessarily control. So then for mini reviews here, I got to go to the Gateway to see Lost Highway. This is, of course, the David Lynch film. And then my Voyage to the Fives rewatch is Godzilla vs. Destoroyah. I went to the Wexner Center for the Arts to check out The Innocents from 1961. And then I have a screener I got to see of Tribe. And then my Voyage to the Fives rewatch of a 2025 film is going to be Borderline. And I'm going to end this out with a short film that I got to check out featuring some people that I know from my hometown. So that's going to be Desperate Measures is the name of that. So I don't think there's anything else I'm going to do here for this intro outside saying thank you so much for listening, and I hope you enjoy coming this journey with me. I have a great thing here that I wanted to go ahead and give you an offer for since it fell into my lap and wanted to go ahead and share it with you. I have been given a promo code here for shimmerwoodbeverages.com. These are CBD infused seltzers that are award winning. They have been twice recognized by Forbes as the #1 CBD beverage in the United States and the best lower potency option out there. It blends full spectrum CBD with local Maine fruits and cocktail bitters for bold flavors, crafted without added sugars, caffeine, or artificial ingredients, which if you know me, that is something that I prefer because I get enough of the caffeine and I'm trying to get away from sugars. So it's designed for relaxation without intoxicating effects, perfect straight from the can or a refreshing cocktail or mocktail base, depending on what you're looking for there. This has unique flavors like raz lime, chai cherry, ginger orange, and just hemp. Now, Simmerwood offers a health-conscious alternative to sugary sodas or alcohol, made to provide a calm, clear focus for natural stress relief. Each can contains 5 milligrams of full-spectrum CBD for a balancing, calming effect. So this one here is at, like I said, shimmerwood.com, and my promo code here for you listeners is actually you get 30% off of if you use my code, and this is, like I said, a great deal if you can go ahead and you want to do that, and my code is going to be Cinephile1. So if you want to check out more of the information or check out their site, there will be links in the show notes for you to check that out there.
Pod Nation TV has you beamed up with Out of This World award-winning podcast, found exclusively on Pod Nation TV. Download Pod Nation TV for Roku and Fire TV. Pod Nation TV, Out of This World.
And for my first mini review is going to be Lost Highway from 1997. Now, this isn't necessarily a horror film, but I'll kind of get into why I'm including it here. But this is directed by David Lynch, who co-wrote this with Barry Gifford. The stars Bill Pullman, Patricia Arquette, and John Rolius. I think that's how you say that. But it's a psychological thriller drama mystery film that is a co-production of France and the United States. Currently sitting on a 7.6 on IMDb and a 4.1 on Letterboxd, with our synopsis being: after a bizarre encounter at a party, a jazz saxophonist is framed for the murder of his wife and sent to prison, where he inexplicably morphs into a young mechanic and begins leading a new life. This is a film that, before I ever saw it, was on my list for some time to see. I had seen Eraserhead in college and checked out Blue Velvet when I started working through a list of horror films for my research. David Lynch is, the writer and director here, is an interesting guy. He has such an interesting thing that he can do with like nightmare and dream-like feel while also just kind of grounding it in a way where it just sucks me in. Now, I originally saw this for the podcast under the Sarah Summer Challenge series. I've also now seen it because the Gateway Film Center was showing this, and I went to go see it in the theater. So where I'm going to kind of jump into here is I've seen a few more things from Lynch, so I came to expect more of what we got here. I'm glad this isn't my first, as I don't think this should be a first one you see, because it might kind of throw you off. His command of surreal elements while still grounded is just amazing. I'm not sure there's many filmmakers out there that can balance it like he does. So this is interesting with things that we get. Arquette is playing two characters here of Renee and Alice, and that's intriguing. Now, something is shown later to connect these story threads. What I find interesting even more so is that it almost feels like we're seeing both sides of this character, where Renee has dark hair and Alice has light. Now, she is a bridge between our character of Fred Madison, portrayed by Bill Pullman, and then the other guy we have here is Pete, portrayed by Balthazar Getty. Now, I'll be honest, after seeing this twice, I ended up having to look up the explanation here. I came into a conclusion that Pete is a mental escape for Fred, but the truth seeps into this, and we don't necessarily see it until what kind of happens. There are still things that don't make complete sense. Not all of this goes, and some of this goes back to that surreal nature just kind of overall. And kind of the thing we're getting here is Fred is the saxophone player who is accused of murdering his wife, and then something kind of weird happens, and then we start following Pete. So there's something I want to explore here, and this is the dreamlike feel that I like so much. We aren't completely sure what's real and what's fantasy. There's an interesting line that to include here from Fred is that he hates video cameras because he likes to remember things the way he wants and not necessarily how they really happen. That's fitting when the tape shows him killing Renee. On the other side, Pete is a guy who is popular with the ladies, but he's also naive. I think that it comes with age, but he's being manipulated so easily by Alice. Now, things get mixed up in things that are kind of a bit much for him. That reminds me of like Blue Velvet, where that lead character gets mixed up into something and, starts to see the underlying seedy underbelly of his town. Now, something else is the idea here of male jealousy and paranoia that stems from it. Fred doesn't fully trust Renee. Early on, he said she doesn't want to go to the club to watch him perform. What he asks is what she's going to do instead. She says she's going to read. He doesn't believe it, and they laugh. Now, there's also Mr. Eddie here, who is portrayed by Robert Loggia. And he all but threatens Pete when he believes that somebody is seeing Alice behind his back. Pete, when he learns that she is an actor in porn films, he gets uncomfortable and we see jealousy there. Renee and Alice are kind of femme fatales who can make their own decisions. They also use their femininity as a way to control men, which makes others uncomfortable and distrustful. So then the last thing kind of bring up here is going to be voyeurism. The first gets manifested when Renee and Fred see on the tape that somebody comes into their house while they slept. That is terrifying. Fred also observes the party that he's at. Porn by nature also has a voyeuristic element to it, so having Alice be a performer there adds to the idea. We also see that two detectives who follow Pete, waiting to see if Fred comes back out, they're always watching. It almost is a stand-in for them as well. Let's then discuss the acting performances, which are good across the board. Pullman's stoic performance as his loving husband, grappling with unsettling events, was a highlight. Arquette excelled in both of her similar roles, while, frequent nudity adding to that appeal. Then we also here have Michael Massey, who has a pencil mustache. He enhances his character's creepiness. We also have Robert Blake as a specter that's unsettling. Getty was good in cameos here by Gary Busey, Giovanni Ribisi. There's also here Natasha Gregson Wagner, she is portraying Sheila, and then Loggia were a nice touch. The stiff dialogue surprisingly fits the tone, a credit to Lynch's direction. All that's left then to be filmmaking aspects. The film excels in cinematography and framing, while Lynch's signature surreal dreamlike aesthetic seamlessly integrates into the normal scenes, an impressive feat. While lengthy, the runtime feels necessary to develop and intertwine the two lead characters' story. Despite limited effects, the practical ones used look good, serving the story well. Finally, the soundtrack and sound design effectively build atmosphere. Overall, this is just exceptionally well made. So in conclusion, this is a deeply unsettling and fascinating film that showcases Lynch's mastery of the surreal. It's a dreamlike narrative, compelling dual performances from Arquette, and an exploration of themes like jealousy, voyeurism, and perception create a unique viewing experience. While some aspects may remain open to interpretation even after multiple viewings, this has strong performances, excellent cinematography, and evocative sound design make it a standout. This is highly recommendable for one to watch for fans of Lynch's distinct style and those who appreciate atmospheric and thought-provoking cinema. So my rating here for Lost Highway is going to be a 9 out of 10 after this second watch. And for my second rewatch here is going to be my Voyage to the Fives rewatch. It's going to be Godzilla vs. Destoroyah. So this goes by the original title of Godzilla vs. Destoroyah. So this is from 1995. This was directed by Taeko Akawara, but there's earlier clips and original material that's uncredited here to Ishiro Honda, Koji Hashimoto, Shui Matsubayashi, Kenzo Yamashita, and Kazuki Omori. And then for this screenplay, it's actually written by Kazuki Omori, and then there's also some uncredited work, and here's from other movies and whatnot, by Kaora Kamaguchi, Koichi Kawakita, Yosuke Nakona, Shinji Nishikawa, Hideki Oka, Shogo Tayoyama, Minori Yoshida. So if I mispronounce those names or anything that I'm going to mispronounce here going forward, I apologize. So it stars Takura Tatsumi, Yoko Ishino, and Yasufumi Hayashi. This is an action epic, dinosaur adventure, disaster, kaiju, monster horror, supernatural, tragedy, action, drama, horror film that is from Japan. Currently sitting on a 6.9 on IMDb, nice, and a 3.8 on Letterboxd, with the synopsis being: the aftermath of the oxygen destroyer brings forth Destoroyah, a beast intent on killing Godzilla, who is on the verge of a nuclear meltdown. So this is one that I don't believe I saw until I was older, and I was seeking out all the Godzilla films. When I was a child, I loved the Godzilla versus films. My dad was more of a fan of like the character, and he gravitated more towards the solo ones that weren't as whimsical. I'll be honest, I watched most of the series kind of straight through and didn't remember which was which. I did listen to Cinema Psyops podcast when they covered all of the Godzilla films. So this is my rewatch here, as I was saying. As like I said, I've only seen it, I believe, once before this. So where I'm going to start is that this is the last film in the Versus Heisei era. I won't spoil what they do, but there is a send-off at the end that I thought ties up loose ends well. It's been a while since I've seen the film that preceded this one of Godzilla versus Space Godzilla, so I'm not sure if there was any carryover information there. My guess is that probably explains the disaster that is causing Godzilla to melt down. Something I like here is that it's going back to the beginning. The original film to help create this new monster as our new favorite kaiju has to fight it. As a disclaimer, I consider kaiju films to be close enough to the horror genre. That's why I'm including it here in my research. But then unlike Godzilla films, like most of them that is, the human story is compelling here. Set 42 years after the original, the leads are the children and grandchildren of prior characters. So we have Kenichi, who is portrayed by Hayashi, and he's aiming to join G-Force, which is, this force that is trying to monitor and take care of Godzilla. So the only way he gains entry is through U.S. sent research. Is that his ancestor had worked on the original project, so he's been kind of focusing as a hobby and learning as much as he can. So his sister is a famous reporter who that feels a little bit more incidental than anything, and she is Yukari, portrayed by Ashino. But then there's also Dr. Ijun, who is portrayed by Tatsumi. Now, the oxygen destroyer, he created the micro-oxygen. That's a creation that explains how Destoroyah mutates, but it also features kind of depth to the plot. The military successfully fights smaller forms of this monster, which is something that you don't normally see. So incorporated in Super X3 is also something that I appreciate, since this is something that has reoccurred in films prior to this. Let's then shift over to social commentary. If you know me, I love when a movie can subtly discuss real issues without being in your face. The problem that I have here is that Godzilla films have preached against nuclear testing for 40 plus years by this point. It's still relevant. I do like the point that they used the oxygen destroyer to defeat the original Godzilla, and there are consequences no one saw coming. That's a fresh take on critiquing the use of the atom bomb for me. Humanity being to blame for the creation of Destoroyah and Godzilla melting down works. I think then I'll shift over to talking about the filmmaking aspects. Let's start with why everybody comes to these movies, seeing the kaiju fight. I love the practical approaches to the giant monsters and the military weapons. There's charm to seeing people in suits bringing the creatures to life. They overcharged Godzilla, and that looks great. There's a Godzilla Jr. here. That's what they call it in this one. This gives a kind of classic look that they're still incorporating that suit. I love Destoroyah. He looks like a dragon mixed with a demon. That makes it creepy. Then the miniature work here is also great, helping that force perspective that makes these work. Now, I can't credit anything that I said above without going to cinematography and framing is what bring this to life. The battle scenes are great. I love that we get like Godzilla rampaging in the city. We see smaller Destoroyahs being fought by humans, and then we get this epic battle between the kaiju. There is early CGI here that doesn't always look good. I also don't know how else you could do it. I've definitely seen worse from films after this. The soundtrack isn't as original, taking mostly cues from the original films and I believe other ones from in between. What I will say is that being the last film of the era, I am more forgiving because this is like a send-off. It's paying homage. The last thing that this does is it runs a little bit too long at 100 minutes. I'll be honest, I didn't necessarily feel it, so I will give credit to keep it moving at a good pace. So all that's left then to be the acting performances. I'll say here that the actors in the suits are great of Godzilla, Jr., and Destoroyah. Whatever was done to bring those kaiju to life is great. They're in the human characters. Tatsumi works as this doctor who is to blame in part for this creature and the creation of the villain. He is underdeveloped and does disappear during the second act, though, which is kind of interesting. I like Hayuyashi as our expert. Ishino also disappears after helping build up the story. Then we also have Megumi Okada and Sayaka Asawawa. Now, they are tracking down Godzilla Jr. and kind of monitoring him. I feel like they should have had a little bit more in the story, but then again, we're also running a bit long, so it's kind of hard to do that. The rest of the cast is fine. I love the old footage being edited in. Not too much of it, though, so that's good. It's glad to see that they also brought Momoko Kochi, and I love paying homage there. So in conclusion, this stands out as a strong entry in the Heisei era, offering a compelling blend of human drama, poignant social commentary, and exhilarating kaiju action. While not without its minor flaws, there are some early CGI and underdeveloped human characters. The film's dedication to practical effects, inventive monster design, and impactful homage to the original Godzilla make it a memorable experience. Its emotional send-off for an iconic era and thought-provoking themes solidifies its recommendation for any fan of kaiju cinema. So my rating here for Godzilla vs. Destoroyah is going to be a 7.5 out of 10 on this most recent watch. And then up next for you here is a mini review. I have a rewatch of The Innocents. I got to go see this at the Wexner Center for the Arts. So this came out in 1961, directed by Jack Clayton. This is written by William Archibald and Truman Capote, interestingly enough, but this is from the novella by Henry James. Stars Deborah Kerr, Peter Wingard, and Meg Jenkins. So this one has a lot of little subtitles here. It's going to be, or sub-genres. This is a psychological drama, psychological horror, thriller, supernatural, mystery film that is from the United Kingdom. It is currently sitting on a 7.7 on IMDb and a 4.1 on Letterboxd, with our synopsis being: a young governess, Miss Giddens, is hired to care for two orphan children, Flora and Miles, at a large country estate. She becomes convinced that the house and the grounds are haunted by the spirits of the former governess, Miss Jessel, and the man named Peter Quint. And if you'd like to hear a mini review for The Innocents, this would have been back on episode 68, which was Women Who Directed Films number 4, that featured Eve's Bayou and St. Maud. This was the first little mini review that I had over there, as I gave this one a rewatch that first time. So Giddens is portrayed by Carr, and then you have Flora by Pamela Franklin. You have Miles, which is pretty interesting because I just really watched a movie with him in it, Village of the Damned, as he is portrayed, I believe he is David in that original film, or the original version of that film. And he is portrayed by Martin Stevens. And then Miss Jessel here is done by Clytie Jessup, and then Peter Quint by Wingard. So for this one here is, I originally saw this after college, read the novella, and end up rewatching this one as a Odyssey Through the Ones film. And then now that this came to the theater, I gave it another go there. So this is a character study of Miss Giddens and her mental state, and her descent into madness, actually portrayed by Carr. So ambiguity surrounding the supernatural elements make this one question whether there are actually hauntings, or is this a product of Miss Giddens' mind? Because we do see from very early on that she does have some issues here, where she grew up in a house of repression because her father was a local vicar in a small town, and there's also these things where the uncle, portrayed by Michael Redgrave, says some things. We see that there's also repression there, so there also could be some things here about sexuality and corruption. So the supporting cast here, including Meg Jenkins as Mrs. Gross, and Franklin and Stevens as Flora and Miles, they're pretty good for their performances, especially the two kids for as young as they are. Freddie Francis has some beautiful cinematography here with black and white, and just how he frames the shots are just great. The subtle soundtrack highlights the atmosphere. And we also have this reoccurring song from a music box that I really enjoy. So this one actually just came up for me, as I think this is a masterful and unsettling psychological horror film and a must-see for fans of classic cinema. And for me, I give this one an 8.5 out of 10 after this most recent watch, moving up a half point here. And then up next, I have a screener here that I got, and that is going to be Tribe from 2025. This is written and directed by Dan Ozma, and I believe he also stars in this one. But this also has Nicole Jones and Taiwana Bowman. If I've mispronounced her name, I do apologize. This is a horror film from the United States. Now, there are no ratings on IMDb yet, and there is no Letterboxd page at this time here. And our synopsis is: a desperate man lost in the West Coast mountains has to reconstruct his past in order to step from the edge of insanity. So this one I got the chance to see via screener thanks to Dan Harari from Asbury PR Agency. He sent over a press release and information about the film. I was intrigued since there was some limited information, and that adds to the mystique here, especially because this is found footage. But this time, It's been a while since I perused that information, and so I came into this one blind because of that kind of gap there. So what we have here is we're following mostly a character named Devin. I believe he's portrayed by Asma. So he ends up we actually get an interesting little opening here, and then he ends up going back to watch some of this old footage to kind of piece together what led him there. So I think this is effective in what it does there, especially as a found footage film. It isn't something that I'm always a fan of. We see there's something wrong with Devin. It then goes, what I'm not a big fan of, this starts at the end and then goes back to lead us to what got us there. And so I do like found footage. I want to make sure that's known here. So that does take away tension, though, when you do it that way. But it's still interesting how this information gets relayed to us. So what we get here is that we have Devin, who is now retired, and gets information from his ex-wife, who is portrayed by Nicole Jones, and she is Kate. Now, something here is that she was given stuff by a friend from college. They have Charlie, who is portrayed by Keaton Asma, and it was told that once Devin retires to give it to him. So that's something to keep in mind there. Devin gets sucked into looking into this footage. This sparks him to go to the desert looking for these caves near Mount Shasta and trying to make sense of the evidence that he finds. It feels like we're there with him, so that kept me invested. There's another element here that sends off things that he finds to different experts. That helped me with the information to keep the story developing. So something here in the press release that I actually read before I did writing my review was this was inspired by Philip K. Dick and his futuristic concepts. There's also cosmic horror elements from H.P. Lovecraft. That's something I get sucked into as well. It is done through like a stricter cult that is an offshoot of the Mormon faith, which I think is kind of an interesting thing to do. What's interesting there is that this is supposed to follow the teachings of their Lord, but slowly corruption crept in and they were tempted by different things. Something of interesting here is that once you're into so deep to a religion like this and get swayed, you can justify it any way that you can. That's just human nature, and I love being explored here. I will then say that I love how these ideas do get explored. Not all the visuals work, though. Let's discuss filmmaking aspects. The found footage style effectively draws viewers into Devin's intriguing journey down a rabbit hole of information, despite questionable decisions regarding warnings. Because a good handful, like Kate wants him to be careful, one of the experts does as well. And then he also reaches out to Archer, who's a former student portrayed by Bowman, and she kind of tells him different things. So there's also a late revelation that Charlie had said that clarifies things. So the lead's isolation heightens the atmosphere and tension. The creepy, deformed individuals that he encounters and the sound design also contribute to a realistic feel, with CGI effects mostly being forgivable to being like dreams and hallucinations, even though to me the climax does falter a bit. Also up to be acting performances. I'll start by saying that there is an amateur feel that works. I believe that Dan Esma is our lead. If not, whoever is playing Devin is good. There's despair that you get with his body start to break down as he's going too far into figuring out what is happening. I thought that Jones was good as his ex-wife, who still cares. She does distance herself as well, which feels real. I would say that Keaton Asma was good as his catalyst to start the descent into madness from the past. I like Bowman, who is concerned for his former professor. We also have Justina Biosha, Ray Buffer, and the experts that get contacted. All help to round this out for what was needed and kind of develop things a little bit more. So in conclusion, this one offers a compelling and intriguing journey into cosmic horror and cultic themes, drawing inspiration from literary greats. While the visual effects might have some minor flaws, the found footage style, coupled with strong performances, effectively immerses the viewer in Devin's unraveling sanity. I recommend this one for fans of found footage horror, though I acknowledge that not everybody will necessarily connect with this particular stylistic choice. So my rating here for Tribe, this one's quite interesting. If you see this one streaming, I would give it a go. So my rating here, 8 out of 10. Then my last feature that I'm going to be covering here is going to be Borderline. This is from 2025. It is directed and written by Jimmy Warden. This stars Samara Weaving, Ray Nicholson, and Eric Dane. This is a dark comedy, psychological horror thriller film that is from the United States. This is currently sitting on a 5.4 on IMDb and a 2.8 on Letterboxd, or a synopsis being: a bodyguard protects a pop star and her athlete boyfriend from a determined stalker in 1990s Los Angeles. So this one here is kind of interesting. So Sophia is the pop star. She's portrayed by Weaving, and then the guy who delusionally thinks that they should be together is Paul Durison, portrayed by Nicholson, who oddly enough looks like his father so much, which is kind of just crazy. So if you'd like to hear a review here, it's going to be back on episode 285, which was Voyage to the Fives number 4. I had this paired up with Phantom Ship as the two featured reviews over there. And this one, centered around Paul, like I said, is the stalker who is after Sophia. After the initial attack on Sophia's bodyguard, who is Belle, portrayed by Dane, Paul is committed to a mental hospital. 6 months later, he escapes with his childhood friend's help of J.H. Calhoun, portrayed by Patrick Cox, and then also with Penny, who is Elba Baptista, to pursue his plans of marrying Sophia. Now, she is dating a player who is a basketball player. It's actually funny. She makes fun of the team names, as he was a Portland Trailblazer, gets traded to the Denver Nuggets. and he is Devontae Rhodes, portrayed by Jimmy Fails. So they initially kind of dismissed the threat despite Bell's warnings. So this satire is the 1990s and celebrity obsession, blending horror and comedy with a heavier lean on the comedy. It explores themes of obsession, celebrity stalking, and mental illness, specifically Paul's psychosis, which contributes to the comedic elements. So for me, I think the acting is actually great, especially from Weaving and Nicholson. She actually gives more of the credit for me just because she does these sly little things that I think work so well for her role. And I also think that this is an accurate portrayal of the 90s, practical effects, and musical selections. The music is pretty great in this one, especially we have a duet between the Penny and Sophia character that's hilarious. So for me, this one actually came up in rating as well, as I now give Borderline an 8 out of 10. And then I have a short film here that I got the chance to check out of Desperate Measures. This is from 2025, directed by Michelle Hansen, who also wrote this. It stars Ken Sledge, Ashley Sledge, and Kristen Green. So the synopsis here is a young couple seeking counsel head to a remote cabin in the woods. So there's not enough ratings yet on Letterboxd, as it looks like there's only one that's a 4-star rating over there as of right now. And I will say that this is not have an IMDb page, but I got the chance to see this as a screener thanks to my buddy Ken Sledge. So I went to school with him. We actually have known each other since elementary school. He's been on my podcast, and I've been on his YouTube channel, and he is a genuinely nice guy. Getting the chance to check this out and review it as a short that he appeared in, I was all in. I will say that I'm going to be as impartial as I can with my thoughts. So the synopsis does well in setting the stage, and just to flesh out a little bit more is that we have Randy, who is Ken, and his wife Wendy, portrayed by Ashley, are seeing a couples therapist, Dr. Justine Gilsford, portrayed by Green. Now, things aren't going well, and both sides have major issues, and they just aren't getting resolved. By the end of the session, Dr. Gilsdorf comes up with a drastic solution. There was a cancellation of an intensive weekend service that she offers. They can go to it free of charge. Both seem leery, but do agree, almost like the last-ditch effort before divorce. So they arrive, and their idyllic weekend runs into issues when they encounter Michael, portrayed by Shane Stefanchik. If I mispronounce your name, I do apologize. Somebody who is staying with friends at another cabin. He keeps popping up at their door, which ends in a nightmare none of them will ever forget. So to leave my recap and introduction of the characters, where I want to start is that we have a simple enough premise that most can connect with. We've all been in relationships that are at a crossroads. You can either put the effort in and figure out the differences or just end it. Both Randy and Wendy have their feelings for each other. There's some deep-seated trauma with Wendy that Randy can't get her through. What he is dealing with isn't something that you can just necessarily kind of get over. And what I mean, she is, not necessarily him, but he's also dealing that she can't get over it, so they're at an impasse. The title and tagline, as it says, they're resorting to desperate measures. That's where they go over to the filmmaking aspects. First, having our couple go to a remote cabin is a classic horror trope. You can't easily get away, they're isolated, they're not getting good cell phone service. Then when you have this odd guy they meet in the woods who is coming around, making Wendy uncomfortable. The cabin they have this set in is great. The cinematography and framing do well in capturing that isolated as well as building on that tension. I'll say here that this is more of a character study, so we are limited on the effects. It doesn't necessarily need them. If I have a gripe, the blood's a little bit too red. There is charm there going practicals. I mean, as a huge fan of Hammer horror, I can overlook that. So I don't necessarily have a problem there. The sound design helps to build this atmosphere as well. Let's go over to the acting. And I'll be honest, I thought everybody involved was solid. Something I'll credit Ken and Ashley for is being a real married couple, but playing this that you're having issues. I know my wife and I, when we pretend to fight, it tends to turn into something more than that. They do well in bringing that heart that you need for characters in their situation. When things escalate at the climax, it is a bit flat, but I can also explain that away due to shock. Also, just being worn out as the night goes on. Also credit here to Stefanchik for being as creepy as he is. He plays it a little bit over the top, but I get like a Funny Games vibe where he's just kind of enjoying what he's doing. I'll also say that Green works as a doctor who's trying to help. And I'll also give a shout out here, knowing Ken as well as I do. I love the fact that he got to name the wife's character's name is Wendy because that was Ken's mother's name. In conclusion, this offers a compelling character study wrapped in a familiar horror premise. Despite a few minor quibbles with the practical effects and slightly subdued climax, this excels in its atmospheric tension, effective cinematography, and strong performances from the cast, particularly the believable portrayal of a struggling couple by Ken and Ashley Sledge, and then the unsettling presence of Stefanchik. So fans of low-budget horror shorts that prioritize character development and psychological tension over overt gore will find something to appreciate here in Hansen's directorial effort. So my rating here for Desperate Measures is going to be a 7 out of 10, and I believe this is actually going to be coming on August 18th to Sledgehammer Horror YouTube channel. So if you are curious about what I said here, go ahead and give this a watch over there when it drops. And that's all I have here then for mini reviews. Let me go ahead then and get you over to the trailer of my first featured review.
This is a true story that happened in my town. So this one Wednesday is like a normal day for the whole school. But today was different. Every other class had all their kids. But Mrs. Gandy's room was totally empty. And you know why? Because the night before, at 2:17 in the morning, every kid woke up, got out of bed, walked downstairs, and into the dark. And they never came back.
I don't understand at all. Why just her classroom? Why only hers?
Where are our children?
We have a lot of emotional parents here. I think it's best if you keep some distance from this place.
Matthew, where are you? Where did you go?
This is where the story really starts.
And for my first featured review is going to be Weapons. This is from 2025, written and directed by Zach Kreger. Now this stars Julia Garner, Josh Brolin, and Eldon Einenrich. I think it might be how you say your name. If it's not, I do apologize there. But this is also featuring the likes here of Scarlett Cher, Carrie Christopher, Jason Turner, Benedict Wong, Annie Jules, Allie Birch, Michael Jean Conti, Austin Abrams, Eric Jessup, Whitmer Thomas, Callie Sharetta, June Diane Raphael, Ronnie Matthew, Amy Madigan, and Melissa Ponzio. So this is a psychological horror mystery film that is from the United States. This is currently sitting on an 8.0 on IMDb and a 3.9 on Letterboxd, or a synopsis being, when all but one child from the same class mysteriously vanishes on the same night exactly at the same time, a community is left questioning who or what is behind their disappearance. So this is a film that I learned about through buzz in the horror community. It wasn't until right before seeing it that I connected it was the same director who did Barbarians. That was one I enjoyed but didn't necessarily love. Now I was intrigued to see this one since I am a fan of Garner, plus seeing that this featured Brolin added to it. I did know some of the premise, or like most of it, so this is my 2025 horror release, as you can tell here, for the podcast. So let's do some featured notes first, and I'll start with going at the top here with Kreger. He has directed 5 films. I've seen 2, both in horror. I've seen this in Barbarian. He has a third that isn't out yet, which is the untitled Resident Evil reboot that I actually just saw some notes about, or some like an interview regarding. So he also wrote this. He has 6 written works, and I have seen the same 2. Same 3 are in genre for him. Moving to our cast, we'll start with Garner. She's been in 22 features and 6 shorts. I've seen 7. So I actually realized, I believe I brought her up earlier this year with Wolfman. So I'm now at 31% of her overall works. 4 out of 5 for her horror films, for 80%. The only thing that I'm missing is one that's on my list of We Are What We Are. So over to Brolin. He's been in 80 movies and 10 shorts. I've seen 23 of his films. This would include all the Marvel ones where he's like Thanos and Cable. I've also seen The Goonies, American Gangster, and No Country for Old Men. In horror, he has done 6. I've seen 5 with this. Planet Terror, he's also getting credit again because it's by itself, as well as Grindhouse. But I've also seen Hollow Man and Mimic. I have not seen the Night Watch remake from 1997, but I have seen the original. Then over to Einenrich. He has been in 20 motion pictures and 6 shorts. I believe he was brought up for Cocaine Bear, which I've seen. Now, I'm at 7 of his 20 for 35%. Not horror, I've seen like Oppenheimer and Solo. Technically has 3 in genre with this, Stoker and Twixt, which I've seen all of these. I also wanted to give credit here to Madigan. She's been in 73 films and 2 shorts. I've seen 7 of her works. Not horror, I've seen Gone Baby Gone and Field of Dreams. In genre, she has 5. And I've seen this, The Hunt, Antlers in the Dark Half. I have not seen Victims from 1982, but I'm pretty sure it's on my list now thanks to Mr. Parka. So then for this movie, we start off here with voiceover narration from a child. They're setting the stage about what happened in this small town. It's difficult to explain, but what we know is that a classroom of 18 students, 17 of them on one night at 2:17 a.m. got up and left their houses. There is no explanation or reasoning. The only child that didn't was Alex, portrayed by Christopher. He was interviewed along with the teacher of Justine, portrayed by Garner. They try to make sense of what happened. We see at a town hall setting the stage here with like a grief counselor. Then, the parents are rightly upset. Now we have Archer, portrayed by Brolin, seems to be leading the way there. Our story is then told in chapters, each one of them from a point of view of a different character. What I'll say here is that Justine is blamed by Archer along with the other parents. There is a police officer that she used to see of Paul, portrayed by Einenrich, who has issues of his own. He meets up with Julia for a drink. His life then spirals out of control, as it seems like he has little of that in what he has saying, and she kind of pulls him into what she's dealing with. And then Archer is struggling at work due to his obsession of finding his son. Again, for good reason there. There's also a homeless drug addict of James, portrayed by Abrams, who gets pulled into this ever-growing web. So things get together and are explained through Alex. He lives with his parents, played by Thomas and Sharetta. There is something else that I'll leave out, as I don't want to give anything away. What I will say is that people are acting out of the normal. They're acting crazy with a rage that might not be able to be controlled. So that's where I'm going to leave my recap, since I came into this one mostly blind, and I think the best part would be the same way of doing that. So I only caught part of the trailer, and that was the beginning, which showed the town hall. I thought they did enough to catch my interest without spoiling it. There is a creepy image that I also saw of a character with bulging eyes that made me uncomfortable. I love how this comes into play with the story. I'll just end this out with my opening thoughts, saying that come at this one blind, temper your expectations, and just go with the events. With that set up, the biggest thing here I want to give credit to would be the writing. Kreger's Barbarian masterfully uses subtle details that resurface later, a technique I appreciate in his work. These Easter eggs are for the audience, like Archer's nightmare or Justine's vandalized car, may initially seem disconnected, but enrich the narrative. Something else that I find interesting here is using an element from The Grudge with its non-linear storytelling. That helps to hide details while progressing the story. Another element of the story that works for me is just being a parent now. There is something terrifying about having these children just disappear. The parents want a reason. Archer and the others blame Justine. There's logic there. The problem is that there isn't any evidence. Another logical route is Alex, the only student who isn't missing. The problem is that he is interviewed and the police don't get anything. The fact that all these classmates disappear on the same night with no other elements connecting is terrifying. And that's the only evidence you have against Justine, obviously. And then similar things for Alex there. That's just something I want to give credit to. Then let's go over to the acting performances. Garner's past subtly boundary crossing makes a logical suspect. How she plays the role is great. Brolin excels as the determined parent, and Einenrich as the entangled officer is interesting to see how things develop there. We also have Christopher's bullied backstory gives him character depth as things that happen bridge events there. And just kind of seeing his story is it was heartbreaking in kind of the best ways possible to help build tension. So Benedict Wong shines as the principal. Madigan steals the show with her performance. The rest of the cast completes the ensemble, with credit here to Thomas, Sharetta, and Abrams. So all it's up before I do some trivia is going to be filmmaking aspects. This excels in cinematography and framing from the opening sequence to the action scenes. Practical effects were well utilized, with any CGI being unnoticeable, and also being forgivable with dream sequence. Subtle, grounded supernatural elements were a welcome addition. The soundtrack and design effectively built atmosphere and tension, and the editing skillfully wove together character storylines, which makes this truly work. So I'm kind of bummed that there's not more I want to talk about here, only because I don't want to spoil a lot of things, but there is some trivia here. To further capitalize on the themes of the movie, theaters listed showtimes at 2:17, the same time the children in the film vanish. Our Archer's son Matthew goes missing at 2:17. Matthew 2:17 in the Bible describes the fulfillment of a massacre of children, the slaughter of the innocents. That's kind of cool. I wonder how much of that came into play. So this almost went to Netflix because they were offering more money, but New Line assured a theatrical release, and New Line's track record with horror were better selling points. Kreger does cite Magnolia as an inspiration, with an unapologetic epic in that vein of the film, which I think is kind of a cool thing there. It sounds like Rooney Mara and Elizabeth Olsen were offered the lead role, but both turned it down. Pedro Pascal and Renette Reves were then cast, but ultimately had to drop out due to scheduling conflicts. Pascal dropped out to star in the Fantastic Four First Steps, which Julia Garner also stars in. Kind of interesting there. This was initially set to come out in January of 2026, but I'm glad they didn't do that because it sounds like this did well at test screenings, so they moved it up. Weapons is described as a multi-story psychological horror epic in the classic sense. I definitely kind of fall into line there, and I'll kind of get to my rating here shortly. Just like Barbarian, Kreger claimed that he came up with the premise first and then worked out the rest of the plot details. He didn't have an outline, didn't know what it was about. It was just like, let the movie show itself. I want to watch this as I'm writing it, so that's kind of a cool thing there. Weapons marks the fourth film of Garner in the horror genre. The other films, I actually didn't even include it, but she was also in Apartment 7A. That one I also consider to be horror, but the other ones I've already brought up, where We Are What We Are and Wolfman. Sarah Paxton also has a small role in this one as well. Brolin, Garner, and Benedict Wong have all been in the MCU, the Marvel Cinematic Universe. This released the same weekend as Freakier Friday. Both featured June Diane Raphael. And then I'm also going to kind of just leave things there, as there's some stuff in spoilers and that if you're kind of paying attention, they actually pull themselves and kind of... Actually, one thing I will say is Justine is teaching her class about parasites shortly before the poor kids disappear. And then Principal Marcus was watching a documentary with his significant other about cordyceps. I think it might be cordyceps, which are... and its effects on ants. So this is kind of, that actually robs these ants of free will, and they'll do whatever the parasites want. It kind of fits into things here that are happening, so just kind of keep that in mind. I thought that was a subtle little thing that they introduced, so, credit for that. But what I will say is that in conclusion, this delivers a compelling horror experience thanks to Kreger's intricate writing and masterful direction. The film's non-linear narrative, subtle details, and terrifying premise of vanishing children create a gripping mystery. Strong performances from Garner, Brolin, and the supporting cast, combined with excellent cinematography, practical effects, and atmospheric design, elevate the film. It's a highly recommended watch, ideally experienced with minimal prior knowledge to fully appreciate its unfolding horrors. So for my rating here, Weapons, I give this one a 9 out of 10. I kind of want to do a spoiler section. I only think that what I would be doing there would just be kind of revealing the major plot reveal that I don't want to do. So let me go ahead and get you over the trailer of my second featured review. And my second featured review on this episode is going to be The Demon of the Himalayas, or Der Dämon das Himalaya. So this is from 1935, directed by Andrew Martin. So the screenplay was written by Eberhard Frovine, Fritz Rau, and Mila Rau. And then it looks like, it's actually kind of funny, it took me a little bit to realize this. The idea is from Professor Dr. Gunther Oskar Dehenfurth, but somebody also put it down as Harold Dehenfurth, and I'm pretty sure this might be the same exact guy. It's just one of his names is how it would be in German, the other one would be in the English version. I could be wrong on that, but it's kind of interesting how close they are. So this is starring Gustav Diesel, Erika Danhoff, and Dehenfurth. So this is also featuring the likes here of Jarmila Martin, Hans Weisenler, Hans Ertl, Albert Hocht, Andre Rock, James Bilohef, Pero Giglioni, Delib Machtmand, Josef Denman, Paul Reinkoff, Rudolf Berbrock, Valiska Stock, Ernst Karchow, and Karl Johannesson. So this one is an adventure horror film that is a co-production of Switzerland and Germany, currently sitting on a 4.0 on IMDb. And not enough ratings on Letterboxd, between like a 3 and a 3.5 star movie over there, with our synopsis being, a group goes on an expedition in search of a mythical demon in the Himalaya mountains. So this is one that I learned about when compiling my list of horror films from 1935. I was able to find this available online. I believe it was on the, what was that website called? On archive.com. There weren't any subtitles though, so I had to generate my own. This being a Swiss-Germany production was intriguing, since I always love to check out foreign films, especially when you're from like another country this early on. It kind of gives you just an interesting perspective into the past. So the title intrigued me. I thought that this might be an early Yeti film, but I did come in blind other than kind of what I shared here. So let's do some feature notes then. I'll start with our director here, his Martin has helmed 31 films. I've seen 2. Interestingly enough, I've seen his non-horror film that he did with Charlton Heston of 55 Days at Peking. So this isn't a horror film on Letterboxd, so the closest thing he has done to genre would be this. Then to the other writers of the screenplay, and starting with Fräulein, is he has 5 credits. First of his works that I've seen, nothing else in genre. This is the only credit for Mila Rao, and then Fritz Rao had one other one, but this looks like the only thing that he's done or close to the genre. Then IMDb is also giving credit here to Dyron Forth for the idea. This is the only work they have in this role. Now to the cast, starting with Diesel. He has been in 56 films. First that I've seen that of his anything. Technically has none in horror, but he was in a Dr. Mabuse film, which kind of like this borders on the genre. His co-star of Danhoff was in 18 features and 1 short. First that I've seen. Nothing else that she's done in genre for her. Last will be then Dyron Forth. It is now just clicked to me when I was writing my little notes here that he also appears as himself, it looks like. So it was in 2 works. This is the closest thing that he's done in the genre. So let's jump into the movie here, and we start by following Dr. Norman, portrayed by Diesel. He is an ethnologist, which I had to look up. This is somebody who studies different cultures and societies. We see that he is in possession of a mask of a Kali Mata. This appears to be a mountain demon from the Tibetan tradition that is supposed to prevent mortals from climbing the peaks of the Himalayas. His fiancée, Anne, who is portrayed by Danhoff, is terrified of it. This seems to upset her more when Dr. Norman is given the chance to join an expedition up these specific mountains, so she stays behind. The leader of the expedition is Professor Willy, portrayed by Dyron Forth. He is joined by his wife Ellen, portrayed by Martin. Along with them is Dr. Winkler, portrayed by Winzeler. And then we also have Hans by Ertel, and then Bertel, portrayed by Haupt. Then we have Andre by Rock, and then Jimmy, portrayed by Bielenev. And then there's also an Italian mountain climber, played by Giglioni. So they're going to head to India to start their journey. It is here that it appears that Ellen is left behind. Dr. Norman walks with a young woman to a lavish temple where she gives him a medallion for protection. She then disappears. The group continues on, stopping at a village to enlist the aid of locals. We see that one of them has some nefarious ideas as he steals all their petrol. This causes hardships later. So this is the only issue they run into. Things do seem to get better when Dr. Norman finally gets a letter from Anne telling him that she has had enough and destroyed the mask of the demon that he has hanging up in his office. The group seems to be moving easier after that, getting closer to the top, which is referred to the Golden Throne. It is a much more difficult challenge awaiting them the closer they get, and it could be supernatural in nature. So let's leave my recap and introduction to the characters. Where I want to start is that this film isn't necessarily horror in my opinion, so I kind of agree with Letterboxd. If it came out today, I don't know if it would be considered, but there are supernatural forces here that are trying to stop our group from continuing on. Being as high as they are in the Himalayas, it's difficult under ideal conditions. There is fear and tension, not to mention sabotage. We get elements of depression, or it could be interpreted as descent into madness. Regardless, I'm keeping this into my research just because it is listed that way on IMDb. Now that it's set up, let's look at our lead character here of Dr. Norman. This isn't a character study per se. He is our lead, and he is more of the focus. What's interesting is that he's fascinated by the Himalayas. So much that he has an authentic mask hanging in his home. This upsets his fiancée, like I said. Now to the point where she's terrified of the Kali Mata one. Dr. Norman, even before reaching Tibet, falls into depression. So when mail's being passed out, he hasn't received a letter from Anne. Now, you could see that this could be like homesickness as one way you could also look at it, or just missing the love of your life. I mean, that's thing too. It is interesting that he is sinking into this causes his character to disappear for a stretch as well. So let's then look deeper here at the expedition itself. Now, this actually seems to be based on a real one. And I'll kind of get into how that kind of plays back in later, but we have this one local who is stealing all their petrol. He gets caught doing it, and we see that he's violent. Now, this particular local is interesting because he's always looming. When Ellen joins the team, he is constantly staring at her, and she's uncomfortable. Now, the petrol being stolen is one of the setbacks they encounter. There's an even bigger one when they break into a smaller group to go up to the mountain. Like, a smaller group breaks off to go up on its own. If you're not paying attention, you might miss this, but it looks like there's a hand pushing off the climbers, like a supernatural thing. I'm not fully sure if this is truly happening, but Dr. Norman thinks that it is. So his idea is that there's actually a supernatural force trying to prevent the climbers, or is it just Mother Nature? Either way, this would be terrifying. Dr. Norman believes that it's a Kali Mata. From his point of view, he sees the hand appear out of nowhere. He also sees the face of the mask in the snowstorm. Since it's set up for a good portion of it like this, that he's dealing with depression, I think it's just a hallucination. He then goes into a dream not too long after. My interpretation is that Mother Nature had her say, and the bleakest ending is what truly happened to this teen. Let's then go over to something here and talk about the historical significance of this. This seems to be the first unique cinematic document for the first feature film to be shot directly on the Himalayas at high altitudes. Part of this is what actually doesn't work for me with the film, because I do think it kind of hurts the pacing as well, because we have all this like documentary footage used. That seems to be the true focal, that they had pivoted to an adventure with some horror elements. It is cool to see. I'll credit that I'm seeing some of the shots are possible done, on the Swiss Alps as well, standing in for the Himalayas. One last element before moving on would be some of this considered to be early German nationalism film. It does seem that in Germany in the 20s and 30s, Berg films were popular, so my limited understanding of the language translates to mountain film. I guess mountaineering was a big thing in that era. Nationalism seems to be coming from climbing to the top, overcoming that challenge if you try. I don't necessarily feel that's much here, especially with how I saw this end playing out. So let's then go over to discuss filmmaking aspects. I do think the cinematography is great in capturing the breathtaking footage of where this is set. I'll give credit there. There's a beautiful yet bleak look. How they edited together the documentary footage worked. The framing was solid. I even like the early effects of the double exposure to incorporate this mask into the white death or the snowstorm they encounter, plus a hand that kind of seems to come from the storm. Now that was all good touch there. Other than that, the soundtrack accompanying my copy was fine. So all that's left then would be some action performances, because there is no trivia available. No one stands out particularly, but nobody was bad either. Dissel shows range as Dr. Norman. The only issue I have with him is that he disappears for a stretch. I do like that we see him happy and eager though when he comes out of his depression, but he's also down on this journey, so that's kind of where I think the range comes from. And where his character ends up was solid. Danhoff is also pretty good here as his rock back home that seems to be somewhat ignoring him, and that's how he feels at least. Dyron Firth works as the leader of this expedition. The person given the most to work with, though, aside from our lead, is Martin. She has this local that is eyeing her, and she's trying to save the team. No credit to her performance. The rest of the cast were solid for what was needed. So in conclusion, this is a fascinating film, perhaps more for its historical significance and unique production than pure horror experience. While it might not deliver jump scares or overt supernatural thrills by modern standards, its exploration of isolation, mental decline, and the raw power of nature in the treacherous Himalayas provides a compelling, unsettling atmosphere. Despite pacing issues due to the documentary-like footage, the film's stunning cinematography, early special effects, and historical context is one of the first features shot at high altitudes in the Himalayas, make it a worthwhile watch for those that are interested in the evolution of cinema and the often blurred lines of early genre filmmaking. So my rating here for Demon of the Himalayas is going to be a 6 out of 10. Not going to do a spoiler section. Don't necessarily think there's anything I need to do there, so let me go ahead and get you over to one last break before I close out the show. And I have a great offer here that I wanted to go ahead and extend to all you listeners out there for oldglory.com. This is a place where you can get over 300,000 items for music, sports, entertainment, and pop culture fans, featuring officially licensed merch from iconic bands and top sports teams. Discover your perfect fan gear and save with my exclusive discount. And that is going to be Cinephile 1. But here you get a 15% discount off of any product, and this is exclusive for something that I'm doing and for what has been offered to me. And I mean, this has things like artists here, Bob Marley, the Beatles, Grateful Dead, the Rolling Stones, Metallica, and more. We also have sports fans have stuff here for your favorite teams with official gear from the NBA, NFL, NHL, MLB, and NCAA, showcasing your team pride in style. And they even have some stuff here that celebrate, entertainment, TV shows, movies, lifestyle brands, and it means some quirky gifts to fan favorite apparel. There's something for everybody. With free standard shipping and same day order processing, Old Glory delivers fast and reliable service with every purchase. Whether shopping for yourself or looking for a perfect gift, Old Glory is your one-stop shop for iconic, high-quality merch that reflects your love for music and sports, as well as like pop culture. And I mean, kind of just running through some of this stuff. This is a family-owned superstore since 1969. They're known for their quality and customer service. You can get exclusive selection of graphic tees, hoodies, hats, and accessories. Represent your favorite sports team with official fan gear. Discover quirky gifts, like I was saying, and fun pop culture apparel. Perfect place to shop for, this type of stuff. And there's a vast selection of entertainment-themed products, including movies and TV shows if you're not necessarily into some of the other things. And enjoy reliable and fast service with Old Glory's commitment to customer satisfaction, the ultimate source for high-quality, licensed fan merchandise for all ages. Like I said, my promo code is going to be Cinephile1, all one word. So if you're kind of interested, go ahead and check out their website here in my show notes, as I'll have I actually have more details down there for you as well.
What's up, VHS heads? I'm Matt. Join me and my two broskies, Chris and Dave, on our movie comparison podcast, The VHS Abyss, putting two movies from the golden age of cinema against each other. Whether it's a teenage soldier head-to-head, like Red Dawn versus Toy Soldiers, or simply picking two from a back catalogue of icons of the VHS era, like Roddy Piper or Jamie Lee Curtis. Whatever link we can find between two films, we've got you covered. With facts, gaffes and plenty of laughs along the way, join us on all podcast platforms to discover who will be crowned champion of the episode. We are the VHS Abyss. Whether it's a hit or a miss, we love to reminisce.
And welcome back. So if you'd like to send me any sort of feedback, anything you want read on the show, or any screener requests, anything like that, you can send those to journeywithacinephile@gmail.com. If you'd like to read any of my written reviews or see any of the old past podcast episodes, all of that is being stored over at Journey with a Cinephile. That is my blog, and that's going to be horrorreview.webnode.com. If you'd like to follow me and become friends on Facebook, it's going to be David Garrett Jr. is my name over on there. There's going to be a link in the show notes. And then if you'd like to follow me on Twitter, it's going to be Buckeye from Mish. And then if you'd like to follow my Letterboxd page where I have all of my reviews, whether that's going to be horror or non-horror, that's going to be David OSU is my name on that. Instagram and Threads, I'm David OSU87. Over on my personal Instagram page, you might see some of my family stuff every now and then whenever I remember to post something. My wife is much better at it than I am. But then if you'd like to follow the Journey with a Cinephile Instagram, that's going to be Journey with a Cinephile, all one word. And then also direct you, if you'd like, to the Discord channel. That's going to be the Nightclub Discord, but I have a page over there. And there's also some other great pages of other shows and them kind of messing around and everything like that. Do highly recommend if you want to go ahead and check that out. And then the last thing I'll actually say here, if you would like to listen to the show a day early, this is always going to be streaming over there on the PodNation TV app. So I will have, once again, a link in the show notes for that if that is something that you're interested in. So yeah, there's some great stuff here. There's some great shows on some of these other networks and stuff. I highly recommend checking them out. And for my next episode, going to be 303. And the two featured reviews, I know I'm out of season for the first one here, is going to be Scrooge from 1935. This one appears as a horror film on Letterboxd. So I figured I'd go ahead and give that watch, the classic telling of the story here by Charles Dickens. And then I also went to the Gateway to watch Strange Harvest. This is a 2025 wide release film in the genre. I'll kind of get into how this will work together, later. And then my Voyage to the Fives rewatch is going to be Candyman Farewell to the Flesh. This is the second film in that series. And then I'm going to try to watch some more screeners and everything. I know I've gotten some in, and then I might be actually getting very close here to getting back to these movies that I have on my list that I've been trying to check out. And then I'm also going to go to see Trouble Every Day over at the Wexner Center for the Arts. And then I'm not sure what the 2025 rewatch is going to be. I'm thinking right now it's probably going to be The Ugly Stepsister. So that's all I have here then for this outro, except saying that wraps up this episode of Journey with a Cinephile, a horror movie podcast. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of horror cinema. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and follow along for more deep dives into the macabre. Until next time, keep watching horror, and remember, fear is just a frame away.
It had been a wonderful evening, and what I needed now to give it the perfect ending